Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. We begin in Nigeria, where the Minister for Interior and the Comptroller General of Immigration have filed an appeal against the judgment of the Federal High Court, which nullified the new combined expatriate residence permit and alien card SIRPAC fees introduced in 2018. In a judgment delivered in November last year, Justice Rwanu Aikawa of Federal High Court Lagos declared as unconstitutional the contract between the Interior Ministry and Continental Transfer Technique Limited, or CONTEC, for the collection of the SIRPAC fee. The judge ruled that only the Nigerian Immigration Service was lawfully empowered to collect such fees. Mr. Femi Falana, SAN, had sued the company, Interior Ministry, and the Immigration Service after the Federal Ministry of Finance had refused to act on his earlier petition. However, in the notice of appeal, the appellant argued that Falana was not an expatriate and was not hired by any expatriate. They also contended that the judge was wrong in treating the SIRPAC fees increase as a constitutional issue rather than a simple contractual issue between the two parties. Right. When this increase happened, it was reportedly sought by the CONTEC, by the company. They wrote to the Ministry of Interior, and their request was granted within 2 days. It was the SIRPAC fees was doubled pretty much overnight. It raised some eyebrows, and in typical fashion, Femi Falana went beyond a change in facial expression and actually went to court and was successful. But now they're appealing, saying that he doesn't have locus standi because he's not an expat and not, hired by an expat and what have you, and challenging this appeal, and challenging the judgment. But it does give you pause that this CONTEC, it's a foreign company. It's owned by an Indian-Irish businessman. Look at the sharing formula, 55% of the SIRPAC fees goes to this company. At some point, it was even as high as 72%. 33% goes to the federal government, and then the rest is split between the Ministry of Interior and the National Immigration Service. So that should give us pause, especially when we're talking about IPIS and what have you, how the federal government is really insistent on the Treasury single account. How is all this money not being disbursed by the federal government? Why is it that they are just getting crumbs? It raises really important questions. And I do understand that the expatriate quota is abused. I do understand that the whole purpose of it is to, promote our own local talent. But is this really the right way to go about it?
Well, I think it's interesting that the matter is before the court, rather than anybody resorting to self-help on any matter at all, when there are issues as to either subsidiary legislations in reference to the Constitution. The important thing is to test the law in the court. And now that the federal government has gone to the Court of Appeal in this particular matter, I think it will be interesting to see what the Court of Appeal decides at the end of the day. But the point you made about expatriate quota being abused, yes, that I think is the crux of the matter. The abuse of expatriate quota and also the lack of integrity in the issuance of even the expatriate permits, of the work permits to expatriates in Nigeria. There's a lot of opaqueness there. There's a lot of lack of integrity there. Now, abuse of expatriate quota, the original idea, of course, is that if you have a lot of foreigners in the country, it should not be to the detriment of Nigerians. And you go to many of these foreign companies in Nigeria, there's not just the abuse of the expatriate quota, there's also discrimination, very open discrimination against Nigerians. Yes. I mean, I've gone to many of these stores, and you see that Nigerians are not allowed to do certain things. They are restricted to slave-like assignments. For example, our compatriots are not allowed either to man the till. That's like suggesting that Nigerians are thieves, okay? Nigerians are not allowed at certain levels of managerial authority. That's like saying we're not competent enough. So you find these various companies manned by expatriates coming to Nigeria, maltreating Nigerians inside their own country. And I don't want to mention the expatriates that are most guilty of this. So if anybody is raising concern about expatriate quota, that is a very legitimate concern to raise. The second thing, of course, is the issue that is before the court. I think the lower court had even observed that, yes, private, interests could be involved in immigration activities if they are so engaged. But in this particular instance, it would seem to run counter to Section 59 of the Constitution. And if any enabling act, or establishment act runs counter to any provision of the Constitution, then it's to the extent of that, variance null and void, the extent of that contradiction null and void. That would be the issue in this particular matter that the Court of Appeal will be looking at. As for whether Femi Falana has the locus or not, well, it is interesting that he raised the matter. He drew public attention to an issue of concern, either in terms of the process or the terms of the sharing formula or the unilateral decision of the Minister of Interior to increase the fee from $1,000 to $2,000. All these will be issues that will be determined on appeal. But we should not just dismiss Femi Falana on the grounds that he has no locus, for even bringing the matter to public attention, as he has done with many other matters, in the last 20 years. I think he deserves praise for his, commitment to public good.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that, because it's so important that this is now in the public eye. There's a lot of opaqueness around that situation. And like you started off with, Doctor, it's good that this is in front of the court. I think you've hit the nail on the head here, but I'll comment quickly as well on the treatment of Nigerians in Nigeria. And it's something that has to end. It's terrible. And it's as though it keeps getting worse and worse. I believe I wrote an article for the Commonwealth on this once about the way Africans are treated by expatriates all across Africa. And there's something terribly wrong that needs to be looked into here. There are companies where staff have protested. I actually saw it happening 2 weeks ago up at Chevron, I'll be honest with you. Staff were protesting outside, and it continues to happen. These things continue to happen. It's good that Nigerian staff are starting to speak up, but we need to see more of it, because that exposure has to come out.
We do. We need to put our foot down. Can you imagine in Ireland a Nigerian company being in charge of collecting expatriate quotas? Or in India, where this gentleman comes from, can you imagine a Nigerian company? It's unthinkable. Why do we tolerate that here?
Honestly,
it's ridiculous.
I can't believe it.
Now, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari at the weekend ordered the deployment of air fighter jets to support the efforts of troops and policemen combating the activities of bandits, kidnappers, and cattle rustlers terrorizing remote communities around the Dogon Gunner forest in Niger State. The presidency disclosed last night that the deployment will take off this week as the Harmattan dust gradually eases off in the sky to provide effective air attacks against the activities of the criminals. Presidential spokesman Malam Garba Shehu said Buhari described repeated attacks which have claimed several lives in the communities as a disaster for the nation, in quotes. He also said Nigerian Air Force is setting up refueling facilities at Minna, Niger State to support the aircraft operations. Now, I'm particular about language, so I'm really pleased that we're not getting any vague euphemisms. We're actually getting the correct terminology, which is a disaster. It's nothing short of disastrous. And we have the latest global terror index. Nigeria remains at number 3 after Iran and Afghanistan for most terrorized country in 2019. And it's really awful. We need to take a short break now, and we'll be back with more on the news headlines. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News. Yes, before we went on break, we were discussing the efforts by the federal government of Nigeria to check the menace of banditry, kidnapping, terrorism in Niger State, particularly with the reported case of assault in at least one local government and in Dogon Gunner forest in that state. Well, I think that whatever is done by the authorities that appears responsive, proactive, should be commended. But again, what this shows is the fact that, look, no part of Nigeria is safe. I mean, we've been talking about Sambisa Forest. We've had issues in Dapchi. We've had issues in some other parts of the Northeast. Now we are having issues in the north-central region of Nigeria. So it looks like, the bandits, the terrorists, they are changing tactics, they are adjusting, they are moving further inwards, they are moving further southwards, and Nigeria remains at threat. So the combination of the Air Force and other security agencies trying to address this issue, I think is something to be applauded. But again, we will measure their effectiveness in terms of result. We know how difficult it is to fight an asymmetrical war, but again, the Nigerian government must just see this as an indication that it's a very serious task. What is even more disturbing is the indication of the religious dimension to the crisis that we face. On Christmas Eve, 11 northern Christians were beheaded by ISWAP. This year, we have had the case of a student, in Maiduguri, also being shot, and the video is everywhere. He's also a Christian. We've also had the case of the chairman of CAN in Adamawa State, also being, assassinated by Boko Haram. So you keep having, the Boko Haram perpetually changing strategy, and government must pay close attention to that. It's either they are extending territory in terms of area of operation, or they are targeting Christians. That is something that should be of great interest to the intelligence agencies and the relevant security agencies, so that we don't find ourselves in the course of 2019, 2020, being overwhelmed by these terrorists, by these bandits, by these kidnappers. So this should not be an isolated operation. I think that the Nigerian government needs to further emphasize the point that security is the biggest challenge that we face right now. So it appears.
Certainly, and it is very worrying because it does seem to be spreading further down south, and it does seem as though a religious tone has been placed on whatever sort of insurgency we're facing, the multifaceted insurgency we're facing all across Nigeria right now, and it's devastating. The government has to do something. But we'll move on to Aaron Akerejala, who is here to give us the news and sports today, and I know you have some very sad news.
A really sad good morning, ladies. Doctor, good morning. And the entire world has been gripped by the loss of Kobe Bryant, a basketball legend in the United States. As a popular politician said once, that I'm in serious pain just thinking about it, understanding what this actually meant, not just to basketball, because people might have known him as a basketball star, but some people don't know that he actually transcended basketball because he grew up in Italy, found love for football in Italy. As a matter of fact, he was an ardent supporter of the AC Milan club, and also he loved David Beckham, and they were thinking of doing great things together. But what do we know about this particular crash? It's rather unfortunate, knowing that he was actually traveling in his private helicopter, and when it all suddenly burst up in flames, it was around 10 a.m. in the United States, 10 a.m. in the United States. It was around the Calabasas City area, they say just behind Kourtney Kardashian's house, because we know the Kardashians actually housed themselves in the Calabasas City area, and that just behind Kourtney Kardashian's house was where these things actually happened, and they actually spiraled out of control. The pilots then contacted the Burbank airport about 9:30, complaining of some issues, and they were trying to direct him, and things just went haywire. And at 10 a.m. Time in Calabasas, then things just turned for the worst. And the rather unfortunate thing was that we can also confirm that about 9 people were actually in the helicopter, and
Not
one
5?
of them.
No.
Initially,
Wow.
initially it was said to be 5 people, but later on, the LA County Sheriff said there were 9 people on board, and there were no survivors, and one of them was his very young daughter, Gianna, who had been garnering quite a lot of reputation because Kobe Bryant, like we know, had 4 daughters, and all of them were female. Had 4 daughters, and basketball faithfuls who had seen what he had done, because in the history of basketball, Michael Jordan is arguably the greatest basketballer of all time. But after Michael Jordan had passed away, had actually retired back in 2003, Kobe Bryant was the man who they looked up to and was the biggest basketballer after Michael Jordan. He started his career in 1996 and moved on. He was with LA Lakers for 20 seasons. And a lot of people asked him the question that after all you've done, you should have a son that should carry on your legacy. and he looked at Jimmy Fallon and told him that, listen, my daughter is the man I'm looking for, and she can actually do that. They had a dream of playing in the WNBA at some point. As a matter of fact, she played for his team, and they were heading to the Mamba Academy, where she plays for a basketball game when all this actually happened. It's really sad, and as it is right now, people are still coming to terms with what has happened and what the legacy has actually left behind. Because when you look at the man, his dedication to the team, the LA Lakers, as a matter of fact, that's why I decided to even sport a yellow tie.
With purple, you're wearing Lakers colors.
Yes, exactly, the Lakers colors today. Just because Kobe Bryant is a man that transcended basketball. The way he went about business was quite different, and the way he went about his game, his dedication was quite different from every other. As a matter of fact, he stood out because while several people till date, if they want to have endorsements in basketball, would always go for premium products, he always insisted when he had a $45 million deal with Nike that, listen, I want things that will be given to everybody, that will be available to everybody. And that just typified the man, Kobe Bryant, to have lost that man. He was just 41 years of age, as a matter of fact, because he retired quite early. People said, why should you have retired at 30 years? Because we know of people that had even pushed it farther than 40. But when you spend 20 years in a sport, it gets to you. So he wanted to probably just enjoy his life. He was paid over $680 million in his entire career with the NBA, with the NBA team, the LA Lakers, which is one of the most prestigious teams. So I felt he wanted to probably sit back and enjoy it while he was just beginning to enjoy life after retirement. Now this happens, and the wife will have to deal with the death of not just a husband, but the death of also a daughter who was 30 years of age.
Well, our condolences
unspeakably tragic.
Really tragic.
Unspeakable.
It's the saddest
his wife
thing.
and children, Vanessa,
Yes,
and the three daughters who have survived them. From the outpouring of grief and tributes, it is very clear that he is greatly missed, considering the impact that he made in the world of sports. He was without doubt a great athlete and a humanist, a man who was able to use the platform of sports to connect not just with the American ideal, but also with the rest of humanity. And the question you ask is, what is this? Is it fate or is it just accident? You recall that as far back as 2002, someone had tweeted that Kobe Bryant was going to die in a helicopter crash.
I find things like that really disgusting.
But I think that, the reason that person probably posted that was because in the course of his career, the 20 seasons that he played for the Lakers, he shuttled between his residence, and California in a helicopter. But what has happened is an accident, but it's an accident that shocks the world. It's an accident that has robbed us of a genius, of a man, who was quite distinguished in his chosen field. As you have pointed out, he was number 2 only, perhaps in some people's estimation, to Michael Jordan. Yeah. He was most valuable player in 2008. He's in the Hall of Fame. His 2 jerseys, he alone had 2 jerseys retired, jersey 8 and jersey 24. Yeah. So his death is a loss, not just for the United States, but for the entire world. And you can see that people are grieving everywhere.
I will be taking some tweets, but before then, it's only just highlights. This is the second death we've had via helicopter crash in the sporting fraternity in the last 18 months.
And
because, yes, the Thai businessman who owned Leicester City, we also recall that he too was leaving the King Power Stadium some few months ago, and his helicopter just malfunctioned and just burst into flames, and that was the end of that man. And to see these things happen, I think more caution needs to be placed on probably investigations need to actually be carried out, because certainly they are reviewing some of the last footages and some of the...
Can we take a look at the tweets?
Yes, okay, let's quickly take a look. Yeah, let's take a look at it, because Donald Trump, the president of the United States, said Kobe Bryant, despite being one of the truly great basketball players of all time, was just getting started in his life. He loved his family so much and had strong passion for the future. The loss of his beautiful daughter, Gianna, will be greatly missed. Because Melania and I send our warmest condolences to Vanessa and the wonderful Bryant family. This is what the president tweeted. So we'll be still taking some order of the tweets that actually came in. This was a statement by Marco Jordan. He said that I am in shock over the tragic news of Kobe Bryant and Gianna's passing. Words can't describe the pain I'm feeling. I loved Kobe, and he was like a little brother to me. We used to talk often, and I will miss those conversations very much. He was a fierce competitor, one of the greats of the game, and a creative force. Kobe was also an amazing dad who loved his family deeply and took great pride in his daughter's love for the game of basketball. Yvette joins me in sending my deepest condolences to Vanessa, the Lakers organization, and basketball fans around the world. Really sad, really sad, I must say.
Thank you very much, Aaron.
Yes.
We'll see you again tomorrow morning.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.